Every sport can be broken down into skills. So if we look at football, it can be broken down into the skills of passing, of shooting, of dribbling. For cricket, we've got bowling, batting, fielding, and then other sports may only have one skill, such as throwing a dart or such as running. Skills are learned, whereas ability is natural or inherited. An individual may appear to have a natural ability as a sprinter, but they will still need to learn the skills involved, such as making an explosive start out of the blocks. All skills can be classified into brackets, and we're going to look at open versus closed skills, basic versus complex skills, self-paced versus externally paced skills, and gross versus fine skills. However, it's important to remember that skills are on a continuum. So sometimes it's very easy to classify a skill, whereas other times it's more difficult. The examples we're going to be looking at are the best examples possible in order to classify a skill accurately. Closed skills take place in a stable and predictable environment. So if a performer is to repeat a closed skill, the environment is going to be very similar each time. Examples of closed skills include a free throw in basketball, a serve in tennis, and a penalty in football. For example, a penalty in football is always taken from the same spot, the same distance away from the goal, and the goalkeeper always starts in the middle of the goal. So a penalty taker, if they were to take a penalty 100 times, the environment is always going to be pretty similar. On the other hand, open skills take place in a variable and unpredictable environment, and examples of open skills include dribbling in basketball, a tackle in rugby, and a forehand shot in tennis. So if we think about dribbling in basketball, the environment is unpredictable because the defenders are always in a different position. They might be putting pressure on you as you're dribbling, or they might be backing off. Your teammates are all in different positions, and you're always dribbling at different points on the court. Basic skills are skills that, after they're practiced, they are easy and require very little concentration to complete successfully. So, passing in football or passing in basketball, or if we think about catching a cricket ball or a baseball or a softball, they all take very little concentration after we've learnt the skill. So, they are basic skills. However, complex skills always require full concentration if we don't want to make a mistake. Even after they're well learnt, complex skills still require that full concentration. So examples include putting or driving in golf and taking a penalty in football. This is because these skills, even elite performers, often make mistakes during these skills. For example, a golfer can still miss an easy putt if they're not concentrating fully. A self-paced skill is when a performer controls the start and the speed of a skill. Taking a penalty in football is an example of a self-paced skill, as the performer can decide when to strike the ball and how quickly to do this. Taking a shot in golf or a serve in volleyball or badminton are also examples of self-paced skills. An externally paced skill is when the performer has no control over the start or speed of a skill. Playing a dig shot or a set shot in volleyball are examples of this because the players must react to the speed and the position of the ball. Another example of an externally based skill is a goalkeeper diving to make a save in football. This is because they have no control over the start or the speed of the shot which has been executed. A gross skill is a skill that uses large muscle groups which do not need to be very precise. An example of this is throwing a punch in boxing, as large muscles of the body are used, and if the punch isn't precise, it can still be successful. Other examples of gross skills are sprinting and running, as well as rowing. A fine skill is a skill that uses smaller muscle groups which are more intricate and must be very precise. Throwing a dart is a fine skill as the action must be precise in order for it to be successful. Playing a shot in snooker or table tennis are also examples of fine skills. For exam questions on this topic, you might get asked to give an example of a skill that is, for example, open, and you could say dribbling in basketball, and you might have to explain why. So you need to talk about how dribbling takes place in a variable and unpredictable environment. Or you might get asked about a particular skill, like teeing off in golf, which you might get asked to classify as self paced or externally paced, in which case we would say it's self paced because the performer controls the start and the speed of that skill. Finally, we're just going to have a quick look at the continuum for open and closed skills. So the diagram here shows how all skills fall somewhere within that continuum. So a rugby tackle, for example, is right on the end of the open side of the continuum because it takes place in an unpredictable environment, and by that we mean that every rugby tackle is different. It can't really be practiced in exactly the same way. A netball shot is open because every shot is from a different position, but the same technique is often used, which is why it's slightly down a continuum in comparison to a rugby tackle. If we go to the other end, a snooker break is right on the closed side of the skill continuum. And that's because the break in snooker, which means when we start a game of snooker, is pretty much identical every single time. An archery shot would be another example of a very close skill. The only reason that wouldn't be as far up down the continuum as a snooker break is because it can have weather conditions such as the wind affecting that shot, in which case the archer would have to aim in a slightly different direction. Again, a tennis serve could be different depending on where the opponent is stood, and again on the weather conditions, or even perhaps the surface that the player is playing on, and also whether they're playing doubles or singles tennis. So it's a closed skill, a tennis serve, because it's very predictable. It takes place in pretty much the same environment, but it's not quite as much of a closed skill as a break in snooker, for example. So we must remember that all skills lie within this continuum.